On the Talkback Show, on the radio, or whatever audiovisual device you choose to use. Welcome to the GBC podcast, where we talk about the Packers and our hometown of Green Bay. We are the official podcast of the Lot 1 tailgate party, which is at Lambeau Field every home game. This is episode 88, created October 22nd, 2024. I'm John. I'm in Appleton, Wisconsin. Along with me, Jeff in Minnesota and Neil on the East Coast. Say hello, gentlemen, and tell us what you're drinking.
My beer is my analysis of some debates that have occurred on social media this week. It's the evil genius, Love is Love.
Good evening, gentlemen. My beer is from Bald Man Brewing in collaboration with the Minneapolis band The Suburbs. One of their great songs, a very tasty beer, and the name of our great quarterback, Love is the Law.
All right, and I just have quite simply a Pabst Blue Ribbon Tall Boy. You can find us on YouTube and Twitter at Green Bay Chat and Facebook at the GBC Podcast, Green Bay Chat, and just the audio is available on Apple Podcasts as well as Spotify by searching for Green Bay Chat. Our topics this week, well, it was a beautiful day for tailgating in Green Bay, and a legend is born in Lambeau Field in Week 7. And then what's next? We are on the road to Jacksonville. Well, we're not going to Jacksonville. We went to Nashville, but the team is on their way to Jacksonville. But before all of that, let's talk about the weekend. Neil, you made your way to Green Bay. You had a wonderful weekend. We saw each other on Sunday, and it was just perfect October weather in Green Bay.
It was a truly lovely weekend in Green Bay, Wisconsin. As you said, it's perfect weather, but also fans were very much into this game. The ticket prices were very high, as it turns out, on the secondary market for the game. A lot of people excited about the first match between CJ Stroud and Jordan Love, a match that certainly met expectations in many ways. But it was a weekend where I met up with a number of people at the Green Bay Armory. Alex and Amy got married. And then a number of us, including people who came from England for the wedding, showed up and participated in all of the tailgating activities. And I would say specifically from the English viewpoint, learned something about American sports that he had never known before.
And we'll definitely talk about that with the picture that's there. A lot of white. Neil, we wore white. Jeff, we'll talk about it in a minute. You saw it on television. The whiteout worked.
It did. It looked fantastic. I just wish it would have been a little later in the season, maybe a little snow, but you know what? It looked great. And yeah, any concern that people weren't going to wear white, it looked awesome. It was really cool. The whiteout seemed to be a catalyst for even more excitement in the stands. Is that what it felt like?
It was definitely fun. I mean, just in the pregame, walking around Lambeau, going to Stadium View, it was just bizarre seeing everything in white. And the few people that were wearing non-white, but the Texans fans really stood out. But that actually made it even better as far as interactions with the Texans fans. But it was truly a bizarre sight everywhere around to see everything in white. And the stands, obviously, in the actual game are the main course, but all of the appetizers in white were also delicious.
I definitely agree, Jeff. I think that leading up to the game, from the fans' perspective, that doing it in October, calling it a winter warning in October, was one of those things that people were skeptical of. But looking at kind of what the schedule is coming up and what they have planned for around the November games and things like that, it kind of makes sense to do it now because it's saying, hey, we know winter is coming. But again, with the skepticism, I think as people started showing up in white, and everybody started seeing each other in white, they were like, yeah, this is going to work. And I ended up going into the game. And as soon as we came out of the door to our seat up at the top there, and I saw the white, I was amazed. It's simply amazed. I thought that it would be just a smattering throughout the crowd. No, the entire crowd was white. Neil, like you, to your point, maybe a couple of red dots here and there because there was no significant section of Texans fans. So the white was just truly amazing in the stadium. And it looks so much better in person than any picture that I took or video that I took.
One of the things that Lambeau Field has been compared to is like a college atmosphere. And there are other colleges, they'll do this like Penn State or things like that, where they'll have a whiteout. And I think, again, this worked really, really well. Everybody took it seriously and showed up and made it great.
And it was definitely a robust crowd wearing white, not only in the stadium, but before the game as well. the tailgating, we had an enormous crowd over in lot one. With the weather really helped. A huge difference between last week with the Cardinals game and the rain and what we got this week with the Houston fans. Now, interestingly, I think there were even less Houston fans at this game than there were Cardinals fans last week. And this is one of those games that I think Packers fans really put on the schedule. And we found that out when we were in Nashville. Hey, what other games are you going to this year? The Houston game, the Houston game. Everybody kept saying the Houston game. And Neil, like you said, it drove the secondary market prices up. So it was very well attended for Packer fans, very well attended for those who joined in the fun of wearing white. And the lot one tailgate, I mean, we were crowded. It was just full of people the entire time. And that's the way I like it, shoulder to shoulder and just hard to walk through, and people enjoying the shot ski and everything else that we have in our area there. Good music, good weather, and good times all the way around on Sunday leading up to the game.
John, you were so busy. You missed James Lofton walking right by you and hanging at 3 cars away for you for about a half an hour.
Yeah, I truly was busy. Even people who came to see me, it was like, oh, hey, hi. And that was about it. Our friends from lacrosse showed up again. Our friend Sam from Twitter was there helping out, bartending. Your guys, Neil, came along. And the friend you said from London, he loved it.
He thought the apple pie shot was the best thing he had ever tasted. Incredible.
Well, he probably has had to eat meat pie at some point in his life, so that explains why he felt it was so good. But the atmosphere, though, like you said, Neil, he was trying to compare it to things that he gets in soccer matches in England, and it just was not the same.
I mean, the thing about soccer matches is there's an incredible atmosphere within the game, but there's not the culture of tailgating beforehand. And that's what really took it to a different level, that you have not only all of the excitement of the game, but then you have all of this excitement for hours pregame as well.
Soccer, you don't get the intermingling of opposing fans either. I think they police that pretty well to make sure they stay apart. That's one of the things that we like about the Lot 1 tailgate party. And we talked to a lot of Texans fans that came from not just from the state of Texas, from other places as well. And I told them, you're here for the experience. We want you to enjoy the game. We want you to enjoy the day. I even had 2 Texans fans sitting behind me in the stadium and just kind of good natured going back throughout the game. And we said our pleasantries at the end. And I told them, I said, don't let anybody give you any shit on the way out of the stadium, because this was a good game all the way around. And you had a good day. And I hope you remember how good your day was at Lambeau Field in Green Bay.
Yeah, I talked to a Texans fan at the stadium view, and he said the same thing. I asked, is it your first time here? And it's like, and he said the Packers fans are the most hospitable fans in the NFL. It makes for a better experience when you're friendly and having fun with fellow fans.
Yeah, you're going to get Jack Wagons every once in a while that want to say stupid things, and it's just not worth it. We're football fans. We're here for a good day, and nobody gets to be the gatekeeper on who gets to have fun. Everybody's there to have fun, and that's what it's all about for us.
Well, as fans, and especially at Lambeau Field, we're ambassadors of the game. I mean, our team has been around, one of the founding teams in the NFL. So as fans, we carry the torch. We want to be good fans. We want to have fun at the game, but also be ambassadors to those visiting Lambeau Field. Because for a lot of people going to football games, this is sort of the holy grail and really a destination where they want to come.
Jeff, that's really high concept. I think it's just Wisconsinites being friendly and just wanting to have fun. It's just part of that Wisconsin culture. And it's not this high-mindedness that we're great fans. It's that we're just being fun people.
Then we travel well. So we want people to be hospitable to us when we're on the road. So we have to treat them nicely when they're here as well. Again, a huge crowd, some pretty solid lines getting into the game. I think that people waited a little bit too long because we were having too much fun. It was about 11:45, and it was a big line getting in at the Oneida Gate where the steps are. Neil, I know you got in early because you left a little bit ahead of me, but I'll say it again. When I walked through the doors and then down the steps out of the concourse, the sea of white was just incredible and amazing. We had a flyover on the day after a beautiful national anthem. But just the game itself, you could feel the crowd was electric the entire game.
A game that we ultimately won 24-22, and a lot of very positive things that happened in that football game. And I think as much as anything, what we really saw is our defense starting to take control of the field. They took CJ Stroud, one of the best young quarterbacks in the NFL, and held the Texans to 50 55 yards net passing in the game. And of those 59 yards passing, 29 of those were in the first quarter. That is, they had 26 net passing yards in the final 3 quarters of play, including 1 passing yard in the second quarter.
So with all the turnovers and everything that was going on, was there sort of a feeling like we're totally in this, we're going to win this game, it's just a matter of how we're going to pull this out?
I don't know about that. I wouldn't say that I felt so confident. I mean, we started out and, it's clear that we were able to move the ball, but, you concern yourself whenever there are turnovers that are impacting your ability to score. And quite frankly, I mean, let's just look at it. We were behind at halftime and the Texans had the ball first. I wouldn't say this was a bevy of confidence that was in the stands.
Right. It wasn't, but it was. I think the fact that the team was playing well and they moved the ball well, and you're just like, okay, eliminate this mistake, get rid of this interception mistake, make the adjustments at halftime in the second half. This is a second half team that should play a lot better. And I think there was a lot to hang your hat on in the name of the defense as well. We saw some really great plays on defense. We saw a devastating play with Quay Walker coming off the field. And then after that, Eric Wilson has a day. I mean, he just showed that he was ready to be the next man up. And the fact that he dominated the field in that second half really, it wasn't like oh, woe is me defense. I guess what are we going to do now? Now, Eric Wilson came in and he turned it up a notch, and I think everybody followed suit with him on that defense, and I think the crowd could feel it. I know I felt it. He was everywhere, and the defense is really what sparked this game.
Let's look at those total defensive numbers. 11 tackles for loss for the defense, 7 quarterback hits, 4 sacks, 18 quarterback pressures. And yes, going to Eric Wilson, 2 sacks, 4 tackles for loss, a pass defensed, 2 quarterback hits. He had a day, and it just seemed to be not only that he was making those plays all seemed to be on third down when they mattered most.
Yeah, and it was nice to see Rashawn Gary finally getting into form. I think last week we saw him stepping up a bit. The first 5 games were pretty dismal. Last week he stepped up. You're like, okay, is this the anomaly or is he turning the tide? And he definitely turns the tide on Sunday. Now, the sack that he got, not a great swim move, not a power move, just a right tackle falling on his ass. And Gary just said, holy shit, I got nothing in front of me. And he got a sack out of it.
But the right tackle falling on his ass was specifically because there was so much motion in Jeff Hafley's defense. The stunts and all of the motion on that defense, like the Houston line had no idea where any of these defenders were coming from. And yes, it looks stupid on film, but on the other hand, I think this is a direct reaction to what the Packers defensive front was doing to put pressure on Stroud. And I might add, they put this pressure on Stroud despite only blitzing on 17% of the plays. It seemed like they were blitzing constantly. They only blitzed on 17% of plays. This was something that was essentially done through the front 4.
Well, Gary only had the 1 sack, but he had 3 QB hits, and that was a team high. And so he was always, it seemed like, in the backfield as well. So he's back, I think.
And he also had 6 pressures, also a high for the Green Bay Packers on the day. Yeah, Gary was ubiquitous in that backfield, and CJ Stroud was just never comfortable. And, we said with the overall numbers of 55 net yards, but he was under 50%, 10 of 21 passing, only 86 yards, a 4.1 yard per attempt. And you throw in those sacks and 55 yards passing on 25 dropbacks, 2.2 yards per dropback in the passing game. That is a spectacular defense. It's not because Stroud had a bad game. It's because that was a spectacular defense that put the pressure on him.
Well, in addition to that, Neil, the defense in a lot of cases was put in a really bad position because of the offensive turnovers. So they couldn't give up the big plays. And once again, in the second half, this defense was really, really, really stingy.
Yeah, and we talk about being everywhere on the field. I feel that's an evolution, and it started with Xavier McKinney. McKinney has the speed. He's very swift. He has the ability to disguise his coverage. And he does so even from the point of starting at the line of scrimmage and then instantly being 12 yards off the ball. And not only 12 yards off the ball, but turned and seeing the play. And seeing how that worked, I think, is what has allowed the rest of the defense to evolve. We saw the one play where, again, Rashawn Gary is out of position and he starts skipping along the line to get into a spot. And then the ball is snapped and he just, ball snapped. I'm just going to run right up the middle. And he gets a great pressure on that play as well. So even when they're seemingly out of position, they're in position.
And it's important to really emphasize that there were multiple points that the defense took Houston points off the board. When you only win by 2 points, every single point matters. And if we go on to that second drive that Houston had in that game, they were in field goal range when Xavier McKinney had a sack that led to them punting. They were previously in field goal range and they punted. The defense took points off the board. Obviously, on that first turnover, holding it to a field goal rather than a touchdown. And then on the last Houston drive, again, holding it to a field goal when it looked like they were going to be able to go for a touchdown. And that ignores all of the intermediate things where there were tackles for loss that either forced punts or forced them to go for 3 when they were in theory on a drive that could have done better than that. The defense was all over the place.
And perhaps the biggest stop of all was on the 2-point conversion.
Yeah, Evan Williams just played his spot. This was the entire game kind of a chess match of moving pieces. And the defense has bought into, here's the move we're making you take. And Evan Williams showed it on that play that he stayed home, didn't get fooled by the movement of the line, and it just cleared up for him. And he said, this is my tackle. I think the defense knew something was going to happen. Someone was getting that stop, and it just happened to be him. And he has proven himself to be a playmaker.
And that's the speed too, getting to that point as well. I think we're seeing more of too, is the speed where they're not out of, even if they're out of position, like you just mentioned a little bit, if they're out of position a little bit, that's okay because they have the speed and they're able to make it up. And that's what happened a few times. And that's a key to success. And what we've been looking for and what we drafted for is that team speed.
Even from a semantic standpoint, there is a difference between speed and quickness. And that's what Evan Williams showed on that play, that he had the quickness to recognize what happened. And before you know it, he's in the backfield making that tackle.
There were 6 different drives where the Houston Texans were threatening for a field goal or had a third down, and the Packers had either a sack or a tackle for loss. 6 different drives that ended up with negative yardage for the Houston Texans. That is an incredible performance by a defense.
It makes up for the lack of takeaways. And when you look at this game, Green Bay has 3 turnovers, 2 interceptions, and the fumble on that punt. And the unverified statistic that I heard in the postgame show is that when a team is -3 on the takeaways, they have like a 9.6% chance of winning the game. And Green Bay ended up getting the win here. Again, still, whether that's a real stat or not, being -3 on the takeaways and walking away with the win, again, like you said, Neil, is a testament not only to how strong that defense was, how much they controlled the game, but the perseverance of the offense. 3 touchdown passes, all 3 of them pretty spectacular. Jeff got one to Tucker Kraft. We get one to Josh Jacobs. We get one to Dontavian Wicks. Jeff, which one of those was your favorite?
It's a game of centimeters. Tucker Kraft.
Neil, I even texted you at that one. From my vantage point, seeing that play open up looked pretty incredible. And after seeing all the replays, knowing what it looked like from your perspective, was that window just as tight watching it live as it was in those replays?
So the Tucker Kraft touchdown was in the end zone right in front of me, and I was certain that that was an interception, actually. So it was that tight that it looked like an interception rather than a touchdown. And obviously it made it through. It basically threaded the needle as tightly as it could have. But yes, you saw it open up. I saw it tighten down and look like it's going to become an interception. And thankfully, Jordan Love threw that ball hard enough. He threw it with enough zip that it made it right through the fingers of the Houston defender and into Kraft. And what an incredible catch by Tucker Kraft there.
It was absolutely incredible. And he was already on the ground and then got to celebrate with the rest of the receivers who joined him. Amazing catch.
The Dontavian Wicks touchdown I like because it's a hurried play. If you remember, it was a play where the potential for the replay or calling for the red flag was there. The in-stadium scoreboard intentionally did not run the replay. And to see the team get to the line and run a hurried play and hit Wicks down the line like that, beautiful execution.
And our offense, despite maybe struggling a little bit in that fourth quarter, was actually efficient from Jordan Love's perspective throughout the game. There was not while he had 2 good quarters and 2 bad quarters for Jordan Love. Love was 7 of 9, 5 of 8, 6 of 6 in the third quarter, and 6 of 10 in the fourth quarter. We had efficiency in the passing game. Now, where we did not have so much efficiency was in the running game. Josh Jacobs had 1 rushing yard in the second quarter. We had 0 total rushing yards. We had 0 rushing plays even in the entire fourth quarter. And you talk about why we struggled, why we didn't put the game away. I think the fact that we did not even try to run the ball within that fourth quarter when we had opportunities. And it starts right with that first play of the fourth quarter. We had a 3rd and 3. Jordan Love throws it, we take a sack. So instead of running for it in 3rd and 3, we go for the throw. Houston was ready for that. But again, we had 0 rushing plays in that entire fourth quarter.
One other touchdown to note when you talk about rushing, Neil, our running back, Josh Jacobs, gets the reception. Now, the interesting thing about this play, Neil, again, it's coming towards us in the north end zone. And Jeff, I'm curious to how it looked on TV, because as they lined up for that play, there were receivers on to Jordan Love's left and Jacobs was in the backfield, and Dontavian Wicks is on the right side. And it looked like he was going to be in isolation there. And I said to my friend Dave, who I was sitting next to, I said, this is going to be a jump ball in the corner right underneath us to Wicks. And I just really felt it. And then all of a sudden, Love moved the chess pieces. He made the move, and Josh Jacobs leaks out into just off of the end of the line. And it changed the entire makeup of that defense and brought the safety over, brought the linebacker over, completely changes the defense to now there's no way they're throwing it to Wicks because he'll be at least double covered in that corner. And it turns into a 1 blocker screen. Neil, when as a lineman, would you ever imagine a 1 blocker screen? But Jeff, could you see all of that as well on television, or was it just Josh Jacobs got a touchdown pass?
The way it was set up, you're right. It looked weird, but with the receivers going down the field, it pulled the defensive backs, and they were forced to go. And we've been talking about this now, not only on offense but on defense, that everybody's moving around. There's so much motion. It's a logistical nightmare, a matchup nightmare, and that's exactly what happened here. With this being his first touchdown catch, it was a heck of a play. But that's what's happening here. All this confusion, some of it's smoke and mirrors, but some of it's not. And this one was a perfect example of a really well executed play, little bit of diversion, and run perfectly.
A touchdown catch, but it was all it was all yards after the catch, the way where he caught that ball. And effectively it's a long handoff to Josh Jacobs, and he did the rest with his legs. He zigged and zagged and picked apart that defense to get in the end zone. He was not going to be stymied. But a huge moment, not only for Josh Jacobs, his first career reception touchdown, but
Jordan Love's 50th touchdown pass.
And in the post game, Josh Jacobs said he's giving the ball to Jordan Love. That's huge.
So Josh Jacob made many other contributions in the running game, extremely effective in moving the ball. Only 12 rushes, but for 76 yards, a 6.3 yard per attempt average. Add in Emmanuel Wilson, our running backs average 5.1 yards per attempt. I think Jeff might have had opinions on what we did with our wide receivers, because our wide receivers had 3 rushing attempts for -5 yards in the game, including a critical failure on a 3rd down.
That's gotta stop.
Yeah, Jaden Reed, there was a play where Jaden Reed got the full suplex in a takedown that, fortunately resulted in an extra 15 yards in the unnecessary roughness. But fortunately, he didn't get a concussion the way he was thrown to the ground, but his head ended up squarely in his ass after that because he could not do anything right the rest of the game. It was easily, in my opinion, Jaden Reed's worst game in a Packer uniform.
Jaden Reed, 1 run for 0 yards, 2 receptions for 10 yards. So only 10 yards of offense for Jaden Reed. And you can argue it was partly because we had a game plan that was very possession oriented when it needed to be, with Dobbs getting 94 yards on 8 receptions. But yeah, Reed's numbers were way down. And I would also say not just putting him at risk on those outside runs, but also putting him at risk on the punt returns, where we really seem to have no idea what we want to do on any of those punt returns.
Yeah, the punt return, I lost confidence in that game, both with Reed and Mixon back there, which is horrifying. We know that they're asshats, but please at least try a little harder.
It was a game in which the asshats give it away, give it away, give it away, give it away. That seemed to be the constant theme of the game.
They're supposed to take it at some point, Neil.
Well, they may have, but just a reminder, on the opening kickoff, Mosby had a fold. So we started on the 20 on our first kickoff. After the Houston field goal, we had the unsportsmanlike conduct on Enigbari, so they kicked it out of bounds, and we started the 25. We lost field position because of the asshats. Obviously, there was the fumbled punt. There was a kick return that Houston returned to the 43-yard line. Reed taking the punt at the 1-yard line. Come on, this is something that in high school, not to take the ball at the 1-yard line.
He's got to know where he is on the field.
But in the fourth quarter, when our offense was not converting for first down, Daniel Whelan, when the Packers were on the 13, 13, and 14, had a 62, a 60, and a 61-yard punt. That was a situation where you could have taken that punt from deep in Packers territory. They could have gotten the ball in midfield and with very little ball movement gotten into scoring range. And it was because of Daniel Whelan that they started far enough out of scoring range that they did not take advantage of all of those opportunities.
And with that, Neil, Whelan punting 5 times, a total of 284 yards. He had a 56.8 yard gross average. And according to the stats guys, that is the second best single game average in team history, behind some guy named Roy McKay. You could have given me all day and 2 vowels, and I never would have guessed the name Roy McKay from 1945, had a 61.6 yard average on 5 punts against the Chicago Cardinals. I don't like celebrating punts, but he kicked the hell out of that ball.
And it was completely necessary to flip the field when the offense wasn't moving.
But that's not what made Daniel Whelan the MVP of this game either.
The Packers are ahead 21-19, but unfortunately, after that last Whelan punt, they allowed the Texans to get close. And unfortunately, even though the Texans got the ball with 8:11 left, they decided that they were going to go a run heavy game. And to be fair, their run game was the most effective part of their offense. We talked about Stroud's problems. Mixon, on the other hand, 25 rushes for 115 yards, 4.6 yards per attempt, plus 2 touchdowns. And essentially their game plan was they're going to run Mixon into the ground, kill off the clock, kick a field goal, or score a touchdown so the Packers have no time remaining. And it looked really bleak when it was 3rd and 10 and Stroud completed an 11-yard pass to give them a first down at the Packers' 12-yard line. The Packers have 3 timeouts still, but essentially if the Texans are able to get a first down, this game is over, and we are not leaving Lambeau Field happy. But instead, our defense stepped up. They obviously went over conservative, but a 2-yard loss for Mixon, a 3-yard loss for Mixon, and then the defense steps up when they're in desperation mode on 3rd and 15. They have an incompletion. They kick the field goal, but we've got plenty of time left with Jordan Love at 1:44 in the game.
At exactly 2:52 p.m., I sent a text message to the two of you that said, 1 minute, 44 seconds, and a timeout remaining. This is where legends are born. And that is exactly what happened with this Packer team, starting with the kickoff, brilliantly letting the ball go, taking the touchback. Now you're at the 30-yard line. You have all the time in the world to get yourself into field goal range.
And then Jordan Love stepped up, most importantly, an 8-yard pass to Kraft, critically a 3rd and 2, a 13-yard completion to Wicks. And then obviously that critical completion to Romeo Doubs that put us into the edge of field goal range. And thankfully, the other team made the penalty for a change that got us even closer and moved us to close to field goal range. And finally, with the 6-yard completion to get it close to Doubs. It was a well-engineered drive. It was exactly what we wanted to see from Jordan Love. It's what we needed from Jordan Love. He stepped up big time in that game.
And then we get to the point where we get the timeout and the special teams comes out there to line up for the kick. And I don't think there was a person in that stadium that did not see the timeout coming from the Houston Texans to try to ice Brandon McManus on this kick. And he effectively gets a practice kick in, which is pretty nice. They line up, they do it again. From my perspective, I gasped when I saw that snap. Jeff, you saw it on TV. The way that snap came back, Daniel Whelan, is he a hero for the way he handles that snap?
Yes, he is a hero. Now, on TV, it didn't look as terrible as closer replays would indicate because the ball basically hit it near his feet. It wasn't anywhere close to where it was supposed to go for a field goal of this importance. It should have hit him in the hands or been somewhere close to his hands. It wasn't. He snatched the ball off the ground with the terrible snap, got it to where it needed to be, and the rest was history.
He gets it where it needs to be, but he ends up moving that ball a full 3 feet from where he catches it here. Not only is he catching it in a position he doesn't normally catch it in, he's got to move the ball, get his set hand on top. He is literally looking at the ball, spinning the laces away. His head is over that ball in a spot that the kicker doesn't want this guy's head to be when he comes through. And you can kind of tell that I think McManus flinched just enough to give a little extra time, but also when you see where that kick goes and it just comes inside the upright. But so many little things that happen in that moment. And for the few times that these two guys get to practice together, that they put it together. And again, a legend is born that day. And Brandon McManus makes his way down for a kicker Lambeau leap, something you just don't ever see. But the way the crowd grabbed him, somebody was ready to take home a souvenir kicker on the game that day.
What an ending at Lambeau Field. What a glorious day. Everyone was happy. From my side, thankfully, it did look like it was going to go in the entire time. But yeah, there was certainly nervousness. And it's funny because when you talk about what our needs were, there was a JJ Leahy actually had a tweet out last week where he asked, well, what should the Packers be trading for at the trade deadline? And I had said something about a backup tackle or something like that, but I'm convinced that what we really need right now is a long snapper because to be fair to Braden Narveson, there were a number of the kicks that he missed that had really bad snaps that Whelan tried to recover from. And he does not have that muscle memory that Brandon McManus has. Brandon McManus, remind you, has won a Super Bowl with the Denver Broncos. He's got that experience to overcome everything going bad right in front of him. He assumes that his placeholder is going to get that ball where it needs to be, and he can just do his job. You get a rookie kicker, they just don't have that muscle memory. They don't have that confidence. And that was what we saw from McManus's experience shining through.
So, John, I guess to your point, he is the most valuable player of the game.
Yeah, that play right there really sealed it. We're relying on a punter to make plays on a day that the defense did really well. There's a lot of times, though, Neil, quite frankly, the offensive line looked like ass. And that's why I was worried in that final drive as well. Instead of going for big plays, Jordan Love hits a couple of quick hitters, and he worked the middle of the field. There was enough time for him to be able to work the middle of the field. And that's what was really spectacular about this drive. Just every single play was perfect down the field.
Well, except for the incompletions. But, I mean, it was a well-engineered drive, most importantly. And I think that's the thing is, this offense has got to find the balance between those home run plays that we're good at and those possession plays. And I think that's why Romeo Doubs was so important. His 8 receptions for 94, those were all about moving the chains forward. And yes, the move those chains gang was really going in the north end zone in the first half, especially. But fundamentally, we've got to find that balance and make sure that when it's a 3rd and 3, when it's a 3rd and 5, or get ourselves into 3rds and 3 and 3rds and 5 so that we can march down the field. And certainly we had plenty of good drives, but we've got to leave ourselves less vulnerable to those droughts that we encountered in the game.
Or is this the maturation late in the game of Jordan Love? Not trying to win the game by himself, chucking the ball up, and managing the game, letting sort of the game come to him, the players do what they need to do, and have that successful game-winning drive.
Jeff, Jordan Love is not a fucking game manager, okay? There's nothing about Jordan Love that screams out game manager. We just had some problems on offense, and I just want to point out that 4 of the Packers' last 6 drives were actually 3 and outs in that game. There were definitely issues, and it partly had to do with balance. It partly had to do with certainly play calling, but Jordan Love made the plays when he needed to make them. And let's go right back to a play that is decidedly not a game manager play. That throw to Tucker Kraft was a pure athletic move. I'm going to get that ball such that Tucker Kraft can get it. And that's a play that very, very few quarterbacks are even going to attempt, much less make.
And a beautiful day in Green Bay. capped off with a beautiful series of events on the field in Lambeau Field. The only statistic that matters, Neil, the final score, 24-22. Green Bay walks away with the win. They go to 5-2 on the season. We're ready to get to Jacksonville. Anything else about this game before we talk about week 8?
We beat a really good team. I think that's the most important thing, right? Houston came into this game 5-1. They've got a hot young quarterback. They've got a spectacular defense. And after this last game, Houston is still second in the NFL in yards allowed per game at only 277 yards allowed per game. That's exactly what the Packers got against them. And so even though those numbers look a little bit down from some of the gaudy numbers we've had earlier in the season, we beat a really, really good defense. And we did it despite a -3 turnover ratio. That was a great home win in which we overcame adversity. We stymied the opposing quarterback, and we took advantage of a defense that's really good and scored 24 points against a really good defense.
So while you guys were watching the game at the game, I was watching the game in Minnesota here at a Packer bar, and it was amazing. Packer fans, everybody was high-fiving when the kick went through. Everybody's excited. And we finally found our kicker. That's what's sort of the theme as well. And we were also watching with some Vikings fans as well. So on one of the other TVs, the Vikings game was going on. Now, this was a big NFC Central matchup. You had the Vikings and the Lions. And just a couple minutes after we celebrated the Packer win, we got to celebrate a Lions win in the same manner, with the field goal going through at US Bank Stadium. The Lions beat the Vikings to make for a very interesting division.
Jeff, you weren't celebrating a Lions win per se. You were celebrating a Vikings loss and the glory of seeing completely dejected Vikings fans who were convinced they were going to go through this season undefeated.
The surviving members of the 1972 Dolphins maybe popped a cork, maybe had a drink. So there's only one undefeated team left. But I don't think they were too worried that the Vikings were going to go 17-0.
The other thing to take away from that is how that changes up the NFC North now. We have the Lions and the Vikings with a 5-1 record, Packers with a 5-2 record, and the Chicago Bears at 4-2. And you could argue the 4 best teams in the NFC are right there in the NFC North through 7 games.
On the road to the disappointing 2-5 Jacksonville Jaguars. So what do you think the Packers are going to do against this kind of hapless team right now?
A surprisingly hapless team at some level. I think that when we looked at this game on the schedule, we thought, okay, Trevor Lawrence is going to have a bounce back season. Doug Peterson's their coach. This is going to be a good team that is going to recover from some injury woes that they had last year. And this is going to be a tough win on the road. I think at least 2 of us picked the Packers to lose in Jacksonville, though I'm willing to bet that now all of us are going to say we expect a Packers victory. And yeah, the Jaguars are 2-5, and their 2 wins are a 3-point victory over the Colts and then beating New England, a terrible team, last weekend in London. So they are returning from London on a full week, but they do have that return from London. And I think when you look at the stats for the Jacksonville Jaguars, what really surprises you is how Trevor Lawrence is not having what you'd expect from Trevor Lawrence for a season. Trevor Lawrence is actually only averaging 218 passing yards per game. That's 19th in the NFL in passing yards per game. He only has 9 touchdowns on the season despite playing 7 games. In contrast, Jordan Love, missing 2 games, has 15 touchdowns, second in the NFL, and is also second in the NFL in passing at 270 yards per game. We clearly have an advantage in the passing game, maybe not specifically at quarterback, but there's more than just a quarterback, obviously, as far as the game is concerned. We've got an advantage as far as that's concerned, and we've got several other advantages as well.
Well, this is a terrible Jacksonville defense. They're pretty much in the bottom third in most major defensive categories.
Let's just look at DVOA. They're 32nd ranked in DVOA on defense. I'll note there are only 32 teams in the NFL. And defensive yards per game, 28th. Passing yards per game, important one for us, passing yards per game. They are 31st in the NFL in passing yards per game. They're actually 6th in the NFL in running yards allowed per game. but they're 30th in points allowed per game. So yeah, I would say hapless is the correct statement about the Jaguars defense. And in contrast, their offense is basically middling in every category: 17th in yards, 19th in passing yards, 12th in running yards, 22nd in points. Their offense is 14th in DVOA. So a very, very middling team on offense. And you couple that with a bad defense, and this sounds like it's going to be a fun day in Florida.
And after our interview with Craig Nall last week, I'm reticent to say anything bad about Doug Peterson. And not just because Craig spoke highly of him, but we've known Doug Peterson to be a good coach in the NFL. There is just something inherently wrong with this Jaguars team. And when you talk
it's
about
the ownership, John, it's the ownership.
It is, but you can't fire the owner. So you have to put some blame somewhere else. And unfortunately, Ryan Nielsen, who is their defensive coordinator, is probably going to take the brunt of that just because of the way that defense has been looking. And this is, for the most part, a first job for him. He's been in the position as well as defensive line coach in Atlanta. He was kind of worked his way up through the Saints system after having been a player for a little bit. But this, just something going on in Jacksonville that, did he bite off more than he can chew? Or like you said, Neil, the ownership just is not getting the right players on this team.
I would say if you can't get Trevor Lawrence above 19th in passing yards per game, that says something about the talent level that's around there. I think that if Trevor Lawrence had a higher level of talent around him, or even an average level of talent around him, he would elevate them into a top offense, because we've seen him do that in many different years. And Doug Peterson has won a Super Bowl. It's difficult to say that he would go from being a good coach to a terrible coach. And that speaks to the level of talent that a team has.
And reflecting on our season preview, when I looked at this game on the schedule, I picked that Houston game as a signature win for the Packers. So this is a team that they have to beat to show that they are legitimate contenders. But I also felt that there was going to be a bit of a hangover then going to Jacksonville, because Jacksonville, by all accounts, should be a better team. The fact that they are not, Your Honor, I'd like to change my plea on this one and say I think that the Green Bay Packers are going to go on the road and make short work of the Jacksonville Jaguars.
Your Honor, I will make the same plea.
Your Honor, I don't have to change my plea because I picked him to win in the first place here. And I'm still going to pick him to win because I think this is going to be a signature win on top of a signature win, going down to Florida and really putting up a ton of points.
The only thing that I worry about for this game is sort of what we saw previous teams do and what we saw Joe Mixon do against us in that last game, and that Tank Bigsby is averaging 6.2 yards per attempt. He's 15th in the NFL in rushing yards, but again, 6.2 yards per rushing attempt for Tank Bigsby. And I think that Jeff Hafley is probably going to allow Tank Bigsby to get his yards just to contain Trevor Lawrence, the same as he did with Mixon and Stroud. But this is the one concern, is that is our defense going to allow too many rushing yards, and will those provide opportunities for the Jaguars that could have provided opportunities for the Texans? And it would have been very easy for that game against the Texans to turn into a loss. We needed a lot of things to go right in the end, and we need to not have those things go wrong. We did make sure we've got more things on our side such that the Jaguars running game doesn't derail us.
But I don't think the Packers are going to go -3 in turnovers here either. I think they're going to get some turnovers again. I think the offense, with this terrible, like I said, awful Jaguar defense, I think, and because the Houston defense was so great, I think that the offense is going to be like, okay, let's really do some cooking here. And like I said, I think the turnovers, they'll just take care of themselves. I think the defense will get back on track and get a handful in this game, as well as a bunch of sacks as well.
On the season, the Packers are third in turnover differential at +6. The Jaguars -4, 27th in the NFL. So we certainly, based on history so far this year, have that advantage in turnovers.
And from a history perspective, we've been excited for Xavier McKinney to get another interception. But the last two quarterbacks, Kyler Murray and CJ Stroud, really didn't go deep on any of their plays. So McKinney really not with any chances. But Trevor Lawrence, it's in his nature to throw that ball deep. He is going to try to make something happen. And I think Xavier McKinney is going to be there to also make something happen. It's nice to see that we were also able to come around, you guys, and make a unanimous decision that we're going to say the Green Bay Packers will win this week down in Jacksonville. With that, final thoughts.
The Packers traveling to Florida, they've had good success against Jacksonville. The offense is looking for a big game. Defense, get back on track. We're looking for multiple turnovers. We'll see if McKinney can get interception number 6. Beating a Jaguars team they should beat on the road. Packers are 4.5-point favorites. Go Pack, go.
I'm going to go back to the beer that I am drinking tonight, which is Love is Love. There was a famous Packers joke in the 70s and 80s when we were kids, which is, how many Packers fans does it take to change a light bulb? 3. 1 to change the light bulb, and 2 to talk about how great the old light bulb was. I'm tired of comparisons of Jordan Love to Brett Favre. I'm tired of comparisons of Jordan Love to Aaron Rodgers. Jordan Love is his own quarterback. Let's enjoy Jordan Love for everything that he is doing now, and don't worry about comparisons to our previous quarterbacks. We've got a great ride with a great young quarterback. Let's continue to see that ride out. Let's watch this season. Let's just have fun with the game as it's being played with the quarterback that we actually have. Go Pack, go.
And once again, it was a great day in Green Bay. The whiteout was spectacular. This fan base is energized, and we're seeing it in the parking lot before the game. We're seeing it during the game. We're seeing it during the week. Expect a good Packer following in Jacksonville this week. And then 2 weeks, the Detroit Lions come to town for another gold package matchup, and we will talk about that on the next episode. But if you're watching us on YouTube, please hit subscribe and leave a comment. Find the GBC podcast at Green Bay Chat. That's all one word, Green Bay Chat. We are on Twitter, Instagram, TikTok, Snapchat, Apple Podcasts, and Spotify. On Facebook, it's the GBC podcast, Green Bay Chat. And you can follow us on any and all of those social media platforms. And may you fully appreciate the magnitude of your impending good fortune. Thanks for joining us.
Good night.
What?
Why don't you say good night again?
What?
So, you didn't say good night. You may have thought you did, but that's not how it recorded.
Yeah. Say good night, Jeff.
Good night, Jeff. I have no idea what the hell happened. So
Please tell me you're still recording.
We're still recording.
What happened? Okay.
Oh, God, I'm going to puke your lip. Oh, God.
I have no idea what happened.
When you thought you were saying goodnight, you didn't, and then a hand waved, and then about 10 seconds later, there was a half of a good night. It was like night.
Okay. And clearly it tickled John's funny bone.
Oh, God. Oh.
All right.
Okay, can I stop recording now?
Yeah.